1974, the critically acclaimed film was banned on the advice of the political advisor.
It was not a propagandistic film. It was a serious film looking at the kinds of sacrifices individuals sometimes have to sustain in a revolutionary situation. It's really quite a universal theme about the individual's ability to suppress his or her own needs for a greater cause. We all came back from the United States. We knew China only from reading the New York Times, published magazines. In those days, it was very difficult to go to China. And we really were quite encouraged by the Cultural Revolution in those days. Because, we thought, my goodness, when was the last time so many people really went about seriously trying to reform the society, to start anew, to build the great society all over again, wiping out the old slate and start with a clean slate. Therefore, we were quite surprised to see people swimming out. We didn't know what was going on. We wanted to understand it, because as much younger idealists, we wanted to go in. And why were people coming out? So our film really tried to examine that. In fact, we interview a lot of the swimmers, as it were, and we built 5 composite characters based on real-life stories of a number of real people who had come out. And from them, we tried to explore the issue that I just mentioned. It was an ambiguous film. In fact, it was banned in Taiwan as well, just to show how ridiculous the censors were trying to set, or rather the political judgment was, when the powers that be were trying to second-guess whether a work of art might or might not be offensive to China, or under the new law, offensive to any other country.
For Mr. Shaw and his associates, the banning of China Behind was more than just a personal disappointment.
The company we formed to do that film went under because of that, and we lost literally our shirt, so to speak. And I had to leave the film business to find gainful employment back in the States. Otherwise, we were going to make more and more films based on the possible success of that one that was banned, China Behind. So, yes, it changed my career.
It seems the proposed new legislation won't end the censorship controversy. We'll see why in Part 2 of Focus. These are the people who decide what you see on the movie screen. On the basis of excessive sex or violence or political content, they can suppress a scene or an entire film. Under the new proposed legislation, censors will be able to classify films for showing to general audiences, to minors with parental guidance, or to adults only. Political censorship will no longer cover topics offensive to the local government or certain sectors of society, but will continue for films that could harm relations with other territories, the basis of most of the past political censorship. The Secretary for Administrative Services and Information, James So, says the looser restrictions reflect Hong Kong's more open and politically developed society, but he feels the remaining provision is still necessary.
Hong Kong's economic well-being depends a lot on foreign trade, foreign commerce, and in order to sustain our international commerce and trade, we should not do anything that may jeopardize our good relations with other countries, in particular our trading partners.
You are saying, to the extent any country is dependent on other countries for certain important inputs, then you should allow yourselves to be subject to economic blackmail. England is dependent on a lot of countries for its essential needs. Does that mean in England you cannot show any film made by any English man or woman who may offend the country from which you buy these essential raw materials?
No, it happens all the time. In fact, I think most countries have a rather adult attitude to the questions of national stereotypes and things like that. it's very common to find films in any European country that have that poke fun, shall we say, at neighboring countries or other countries.
Mr. Raines has been a frequent visitor to Hong Kong over the past 11 years. He says Britain has no official political censorship at all, but he adds that the most radical films get limited showings simply because few people care to see them.
Would you say that it's a strange situation that a British colony should have much stricter censorship laws than Britain itself?
Well, yes, but obviously you have to recognize that the situation in Hong Kong is not quite the same as the situation in Britain, much as one would perhaps like it to be in some ways. But it is an anomaly, and you know, personally, if you ask me in a personal capacity, I'm strongly in favor of free speech, and I think Mao Zedong's dictum, let 100 flowers bloom, 100 schools of thought contend, was a very sound one. I wish he'd followed it himself a bit more.
Mr. So feels past censorship laws haven't prevented Hong Kong filmmakers from expressing their ideas. He says only 21 films have been banned in the past 13 years out of 8,400 submitted.
So that very small percentage indicates that our censors are applying the principles in a very realistic way.
But couldn't you also say that the small number of films banned shows that local filmmakers have realized what the ground rules are, and so they just don't even attempt to make films that they know are going to be censored anyway?
Well, that's one way of looking at it. But in my view, I think it would be best for the industry to know exactly where they stand.
This film, Dangerous Encounters of the First Kind, by Choi Hark, was heavily censored for violence and for its political undertones.